Bonjour et bienvenue à cette conférence de presse. Good morning and welcome to this press conference. Je vais maintenant passer la parole à la ministre de la Santé, l'honorable Patty Hajdu. Pour commencer, I will now turn to the Minister of Health, the Honorable Patty Hajdu, to begin.
Thank you and good morning. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm here on the traditional territory. Sorry, there's a lot of feedback here. Can tech support adjust the feedback? Okay, I'll try again. That's better. Good morning and happy Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm here on the traditional territory of the Robinson Superior Treaty Area, homeland of the Fort William First Nation, and contributed to by many generations of Métis people. Recently, we shared with Canadians that thanks to their efforts, we can now begin to adjust measures at the border. Beginning on July 5th, fully vaccinated travelers who are permitted to enter Canada will no longer be subject to the federal requirement to quarantine. Fully vaccinated travelers will not be required to take a COVID-19 test on day 8 or stay at a government-authorized hotel. Je peux confirmer que dès le 5 juillet, les voyageurs pleinement vaccinés qui sont autorisés à entrer au Canada ne seront plus obligés de faire une quarantaine. Ces voyageurs vaccinés ne seront plus obligés de faire une quarantaine dans un hôtel autorisé ni de faire un test au 8e jour. To be very clear with fully vaccinated travelers, you will still need to meet a series of requirements, including pre- and on-arrival testing. We are continuing these testing requirements to allow public health experts to continue to monitor positivity rates at the border and monitor for variants of concern. Having this information will allow public health experts to recommend further adjustments to border measures quickly if needed. For travelers who are not fully vaccinated, I want to remind you that there are no changes to Canada's current border measures, and you must continue to adhere to the current testing and federal quarantine requirements. And whether you're fully vaccinated or not, if you're coming into Canada, it is crucial to plan in advance to ensure you're meeting all travel requirements. Your planning should also consider the specific requirements of the province and territory that is your destination. Please continue to check and follow both the federal and any provincial or territorial restrictions and requirements before traveling. As Canadians continue to get vaccinated, we'll be carefully monitoring data here and around the world. We will be assessing our own rates of vaccination, cases, hospitalizations, and outbreaks, and the disease activity in the rest of the world. We'll watch these metrics carefully as we plan the next phase of changes to border measures. Work continues on a proof of vaccination for Canadians that will be certified by the Canadian government. And this work includes ongoing discussions with provinces and territories who have started issuing their own documents. If you are planning to travel internationally this summer, remember to check the requirements of the country that you're visiting. And remember that many countries have had to make sudden changes as they cope with rising cases or severe outbreaks. As we've told Canadians all along, easing measures at the border will happen as we see our communities increasingly become safe. We all want to get back to normal, and everyone can play a part in that effort. If you haven't been vaccinated yet, make a plan today. Help someone in your life get vaccinated. Follow up for your second dose and continue to follow the public health measures in your region. Thank you also to all of the immunizers across the country for working so hard to help us stay safe and stop the spread. We can see our lives return to normal, thanks to the hard work of Canadians. Thank you. Merci.
And I will now turn the floor to the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, the Honorable Bill Blair. Je vais maintenant passer la parole au ministre de la Sécurité publique, l'honorable Bill Blair.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be speaking to you this morning from my home, which is located on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. And I'd also like to acknowledge today is National Indigenous Peoples Day. Since the very beginning, the government has implemented strong measures to secure our borders and to keep Canadians safe. These measures have proven to be effective, but of course they were never intended to be permanent, and as Minister Hajdu has indicated, phase one of the approach that we are taking to ease border measures will begin on July 5th with reduced public health measures for fully vaccinated travelers with a right of entry and foreign nationals who are currently eligible to enter Canada. It is the traveler's responsibility to plan ahead, to understand their obligations, and to ensure that they are eligible. They should do this before heading to the border by visiting travel.gc.ca. Fully vaccinated travelers who are eligible for the reduced measures must meet the pre- and on-arrival test requirements. They must be asymptomatic upon arrival, and they must provide contact and travel information, proof of vaccination electronically through the ArriveCAN app before arriving in Canada. Our ArriveCAN app has proven to be a very effective application for travelers providing their travel and personal information. Over 2 million Canadians have now used the application for arrival at our border. It is absolutely essential for all travelers to have their ArriveCAN receipt and documents ready, including proof of vaccination before they arrive at the border. And once there, travelers must provide the required information and documents to the border service officers and answer all eligibility, vaccination, and health screening questions. And they must follow the instructions that will be provided to them to complete their on-arrival test and proceed to their destination. Fully vaccinated travelers will no longer have to quarantine or complete the 8-day test. But to benefit from these reduced public health obligations, fully vaccinated travelers must submit their vaccination information using the ArriveCAN app before arriving at the Canadian border. There are no changes to our current border measures for those who are not fully vaccinated, and travel restrictions for foreign nationals, including U.S. citizens, remain in place until at least July 21st. In other words, foreign nationals coming to Canada for non-essential purposes will be turned away at our borders. We recognize that people are anxiously awaiting to reopen the border. And as Canada reaches high levels of vaccination coverage and the COVID-19 severity trends continue to decline, the risks associated with international travel will decrease. A phased approach will allow us to ease border measures in step with the decreasing risk, and it will take into account vaccination thresholds and modeling forecasts, as well as public health criteria. The results of data collected in the first phase, such as the test results of vaccinated travelers, will also help us to determine the timing of future border measures. Discussions are ongoing with provincial, territory, and international partners, with the aim of allowing for non-essential travel of fully vaccinated foreign nationals into Canada in the coming months. Our top priority continues to be the health and safety of all Canadians. And as the scientific evidence changes and the situation evolves, we will continue to consider additional border adjustments. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to turn the mic over to my colleague and friend, Minister Omer Alghabra.
Thank you very much, Bill. Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous. I'm speaking to you today from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. As today is National Indigenous Peoples Day, we celebrate the contributions of Indigenous peoples, and we recommit ourselves to the important journey of reconciliation. Today, we are taking significant steps toward a safe and science-based return to travel. We are able to take these steps because Canadians from coast to coast to coast have rolled up their sleeves to get vaccinated. Vaccination is the key to ending the pandemic. La vaccination est la clé pour la fin de la pandémie. To complement the measures announced today by my colleagues, we will be eliminating pre-departure temperature screening for international travelers coming to Canada. This is so that air carriers can focus on ensuring travelers enter the necessary health and vaccination screening information prior to departure and avoid duplication of work. This will make the travel process more streamlined, ensuring that passengers spend less time in airports. Also, to ensure the smooth movement of both vaccinated and unvaccinated travelers through our airports, we will be working with industry to establish separate lines for these two categories of traveler. This means on arrival, we can quickly sort passengers based on vaccination status and get them to the appropriate screening checkpoints efficiently and safely. This means shorter lines, shorter wait times, and getting out of the airport faster. Today, we will also be renewing the flight ban between Canada and India for 30 days to July 21st of 2021. On prolonge l'introduction des vols entre le Canada et l'Inde. This means that direct commercial and private passenger flights from India will continue to be denied permission to arrive in Canada. Passengers who depart from India bound for Canada via an indirect route must still obtain a valid COVID-19 test result from a third country before boarding a flight to Canada. Today, I'm also announcing that based on the public health data, we will not be renewing the flight ban between Canada and Pakistan. Il n'y aura plus d'introduction des vols entre le Canada et le Pakistan. Air travelers from Pakistan will be required to obtain a COVID-19 molecular test in Pakistan to board a flight to Canada. As the situation evolves, we will respond with new and adjusted border measures as needed to keep Canadians safe and the economy running. I will be working with colleagues at the federal, provincial, territorial, and industry level to determine next steps later this summer. This could include expanding the number of Canadian airports that are eligible to receive international flights. And I hope to have more to share with you soon. Merci, thank you. And now I hand it over to my friend and colleague, Minister Marco Medicino.
Bonjour, good morning. I'm pleased to be joining my colleagues and all of you from this traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit for this important announcement on National Indigenous Peoples Day. We've come a long way over the past year. In addition to the extraordinary sacrifices and progress made by Canadians, we've also seen newcomers step up throughout the pandemic. From putting food on our tables to providing care for our seniors and families, immigrants have continued to deliver essential support, keep our supply chains going, and help to accelerate our economic recovery. Indeed, immigration has been a lifeline. And thanks to the measures we've put in place and the progress all Canadians have made in getting vaccinated, we're now able to take the next staged approach in welcoming newcomers as part of our 2021 Immigration Levels Plan. Today, I'm pleased to announce that anyone with a valid confirmation of permanent residence, in particular those approved after March 18, 2020, will now be eligible to travel to Canada. Je suis heureux d'annoncer que tout le monde avec une confirmation de résidence permanente valide peut maintenant se rendre au Canada et commencer le prochain chapitre de sa vie ici. Plus important encore, cela signifie que les nouveaux résidents permanents dont la demande a été approuvée après le 18 mars 2020 peuvent maintenant venir au Canada. I wish to highlight that all travelers must have a valid certification of permanent residency and comply with all other health and public safety screening protocols prior to being admitted. L'annonce aujourd'hui est une étape importante dans notre voyage à travers la pandémie. Nous pouvons constater le chemin parcouru et voir clairement la voie à suivre. Today's announcement is an important milestone. It will allow us to continue to welcome hardworking newcomers, reunite families, and show Canada's leadership when it comes to humanitarian resettlement. These permanent residents will help drive our economy forward and strengthen our long-term prosperity. We can cautiously but optimistically cast our eyes to the future, which is bright, and the newcomers who will help build it. Merci, et maintenant je vais passer la parole à la ministre Leblanc.
Merci beaucoup, Marco. Et en cette journée nationale des Autochtones, il me fait énormément plaisir de vous souhaiter la bienvenue. Comme mes collègues viennent de le dire, le gouvernement a instauré des mesures vigoureuses depuis le début de la pandémie afin de protéger nos frontières et notre population. Ces mesures se sont avérées efficaces. Cependant, il n'a jamais été question qu'elles soient permanentes. Le 5 juillet, comme mes collègues ont bien indiqué, nous allons entamer la première phase de notre démarche visant à alléger les mesures à la frontière. D'abord, les voyageurs complètement immunisés ayant un droit d'entrée, ainsi que les ressortissants étrangers qui peuvent entrer au Canada, devront se conformer à moins de mesures de santé publique qu'auparavant. À noter qu'il est de la responsabilité du voyageur de planifier son arrivée, de comprendre ses obligations et de s'assurer d'être admissible. Il est important que tous les voyageurs aient en main leur reçu d'arrive-can et leurs documents, y compris leur preuve de vaccination, avant l'arrivée à la frontière. Les voyageurs complètement immunisés n'auront plus à faire la quarantaine ou à passer un test au jour 8. Cependant, pour avoir droit à ces obligations allégées en matière de santé publique, les voyageurs complètement immunisés devront présenter l'information relative à leur vaccin au moyen d'arrive-can avant d'arriver à la frontière canadienne. Les voyageurs complètement immunisés devront tout de même satisfaire à diverses exigences, comme passer un test avant leur arrivée et un test à leur arrivée. La décision de conserver ces exigences a été prise pour que les experts de la santé publique puissent continuer de surveiller les taux de positivité à la frontière ainsi que les variants préoccupants. Grâce à cette information, les experts pourront recommander rapidement d'autres modifications aux mesures à la frontière lorsqu'il aura lieu. Aucun changement n'a été apporté aux mesures à la frontière visant les personnes qui ne sont pas complètement immunisées. De plus, les restrictions relatives aux voyages qui visent les ressortissants étrangers, y compris les citoyens américains, resteront en place au moins jusqu'au 21 juillet. Plus que le Canada élargira sa couverture vaccinale et plus que la gravité des cas de COVID-19 tendra à la baisse, moins les risques associés au voyage à l'étranger seront grands. Nous allégerons progressivement les mesures à la frontière en fonction de la diminution des risques. Cette démarche progressive tiendra compte des seuils de vaccination et de prévision, de même que les critères relatifs à la santé publique, comme le nombre de cas et le nombre de personnes hospitalisées. Les données recueillies durant cette première phase, comme les résultats des tests de dépistage des voyageurs vaccinés, nous aideront aussi à déterminer quand nous apporterons les prochaines modifications aux mesures à la frontière. Pendant que la campagne de vaccination se poursuit, nous allons surveiller le nombre de cas, les taux d'hospitalisation et de vaccination au Canada et ailleurs dans le monde en vue de déterminer les ajustements à apporter. Nous allons examiner attentivement ces données en planifiant la prochaine phase de modification des exigences à la frontière pour décider s'il y a lieu de modifier à nouveau ces exigences ou de les lever. Des discussions sont en cours avec nos partenaires des provinces et territoires, ainsi que des partenaires étrangers, dans le but d'autoriser les ressortissants complètement immunisés à effectuer des voyages non essentiels au Canada dans les prochains mois. Aujourd'hui, nous renouvelons de plus l'interdiction de vol entre le Canada et l'Inde pour une durée de 30 jours, soit jusqu'au 21 juillet. Cela signifie que les vols directs, commerciaux et privés de passagers en provenance de l'Inde et à une destination du Canada demeurent interdits. Selon les données de la santé publique, il y aura plus d'interdiction de vol entre le Canada et le Pakistan. Notre principale priorité demeure la santé et la sécurité de tous les Canadiens. Et ensemble, nous vaincrons la COVID-19. Merci beaucoup et nous sommes heureux, évidemment, de répondre à vos questions. We're obviously very happy to take your questions. So, Jean-Sébastien, over to you.
Thank you, Minister Leblanc. Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Donc, nous allons maintenant débuter la période de questions. Ministers will now be happy to take your questions. As usual, it will be one question and one follow-up. Comme d'habitude, ça va être une question et un suivi. I will now pass it over to the operator for the first question. Je vais maintenant passer la parole à l'opératrice pour la première question.
Merci. Thank you. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. Veuillez appuyer sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. Our first question is from Glenn McGregor from CTV News. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Thank you. Question for Minister Blair and possibly Minister LeBlanc. This is, as far as I know, the first time Canadians will ever be required to show proof of vaccination to obtain any service or exercise any mobility rights. What steps will be taken to verify the authenticity of documents they upload? Will it require sharing data with provinces? And if so, does that not run the risk of violating provincial privacy regulations on health records? And further, how would you verify documents that were issued by another country? If somebody gets a shot in Tennessee or Mississippi, how can you possibly ensure those are authentic by checking with local health authorities?
Well, thanks, Glenn, and I agree. It's an important question, but we will be using in this first phase of easing of border restrictions the ArriveCAN app, and the ArriveCAN app is capable of receiving documentation from a number of different jurisdictions, not just Canadian jurisdictions, and the application itself can verify the validity of the documentation that's been submitted, but we're also requiring travelers to retain a copy of their vaccination documents, the originals, or a certified translation for verification by the Border Service officers. And they have to also carry it for 14 days after their arrival into Canada. We're confident that we'll be able to identify and verify vaccine certification for fully vaccinated Canadians and those who are exempt from these restrictions utilizing this app. And perhaps others could speak of, there's also ongoing work, working with the provinces, territories, and many of our international partners about other systems of vaccine certification. But we're very confident that the ArriveCAN app will do the job for us, for all travelers coming to Canada, to be able to verify the vaccine documentation that must be provided in the digital format, as well as in a paper format to present to our Border Service officers.
Okay, follow-up question for Minister Mendicino, slightly off topic. I think a lot of Canadians were surprised to see NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman show up at the Bell Centre for the game the other night. I'm wondering why the national interest exemption applies to NHL executives and not just players and team officials, and particularly given that there was a positive case amongst a manager, a team official from Las Vegas. Could you explain why that exemption was granted to NHL league executives?
Well, thanks for the question, Glenn, and also good to see you're still following playoff hockey, as I know many other Canadians are as well at this time of year. As I said at the time, we issued the decision after a very, very rigorous consultation with public health officials at every level of government, not only federally, but provincially and municipally. And I want to underscore that prior to exercising the discretion of this office under the National Interest Exemption Protocol, that all officials signed off on the NHL's proposal, which obviously included executives as well. The number that is contemplated by the exemption is manageable, and we know that the NHL has been a very strong partner when it comes to managing the response with regards to COVID. But I also want to take a moment to just really underscore that those protocols under the national interest exemption have not prevented us from keeping other corridors open, including reuniting tens of thousands of families, which we have done both exercising a measure of compassion, but also safely and responsibly in accordance with all of our health protocols which have been in place.
Thank you, Minister. Merci. Operator, next question. Opératrice, prochaine question.
Thank you. Notre prochaine question est de l'inaudible de la presse canadienne. Please go ahead.
Oui, bonjour. My first question would be for Minister Hajdu. I understand that you're going to be looking at the data after these changes, looking at whatever is going on with the pandemic. But do you have numbers? Like we had this 75 for first dose, 20 for second dose number to begin doing something. Do you have a number in mind for the next step to get to change the rules again? Hello?
Patty, you're on mute.
Merci beaucoup pour la question. Nous regardons très proche les enjeux que nous devons monitor. We are watching very closely the metrics that are. Sorry, I'm hearing the translation in my ear here. We're watching very closely the metrics in domestically in terms of what kinds of numbers of people are getting sick with COVID cases across the country, including hospitalizations and rates of vaccination. And of course, as we know, provinces and territories have begun to approach the second doses for many Canadians. And we're seeing great progress, by the way, of second dose vaccination across the country. But we're also watching international metrics. So what is happening in the world with COVID-19? And although we see COVID-19 decreasing in many countries, we also see other countries that are in tremendous struggles with COVID-19. For example, Brazil recently has demonstrated numbers that continue to be at extremely elevated levels. And so it is a matter of watching our own epidemiology here in Canada, the capacity of provinces and territories to manage any kinds of outbreaks, as well as what kinds of disease activity we're seeing internationally. And we'll come back to Canadians in the near future on what kinds of metrics will allow us to have the confidence to reduce measures even further.
Okay. Et puis ma prochaine question, ce serait pour vous, Monsieur Leblanc. Vous dites que vous discutez avec les premiers ministres des provinces pour un éventuel assouplissement aussi pour les étrangers, les touristes. Je voudrais savoir où en sont ces discussions-là. On pourrait s'attendre à une annonce quand? Est-ce que vous avez aussi en tête un chiffre quelconque de vaccination avant de prendre cette décision-là?
Alors, merci, Lina. Et je pense que nous, comme gouvernement, nous reconnaissons le désir, que ce soit de l'industrie touristique, des provinces, de certains secteurs de l'économie, de voir ultimement d'autres allègements en termes d'obligations. Cependant, comme Patty Hajdu et d'autres ont bien indiqué, nous croyons que c'est important. On a fait tellement d'efforts collectivement pour protéger les Canadiens lors de la pandémie. Nous avons vu d'autres premiers ministres, il n'y a pas très longtemps, insister pour des mesures plus restrictives aux frontières. Alors, c'est une question d'avoir accès aux meilleures données scientifiques, à l'avis des scientifiques et des médecins, en même temps reconnaissant, comprenant très bien le désir des Canadiens et d'autres de voir un peu un retour à la normale. Qu'est-ce que nous annonçons aujourd'hui est un premier pas. C'est la première phase. C'est une étape importante et nous allons continuer de travailler avec les scientifiques, mais avec les provinces et les territoires dans les prochaines semaines, de voir le moment opportun pour apporter d'autres changements. Évidemment, si la situation de santé publique le permet. Moi, je pense que Mme Hajdu a bien indiqué les préoccupations que nous avons quant aux situations dans d'autres pays de l'étranger. Et nous avons aussi, évidemment, des discussions à avoir avec nos partenaires américains ou, par exemple, d'autres partenaires en Europe. Alors, nous allons être de retour au bon moment avec d'autres changements. Nous espérons que ce sera des changements afin d'alléger d'autres mesures, mais pour le moment, c'est une première étape responsable selon les données scientifiques, mais nous ne sommes pas insensibles au désir de plusieurs secteurs de l'économie et des Canadiens de voir d'autres mesures, mais ce sera pour le moment approprié.
Merci, Monsieur le ministre. Thank you. Operator, next question. Opératrice, prochaine question.
Merci. Our next question is from David Aiken from Global News. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure who wants to take this question, maybe Minister Haidu, I suppose. So whenever the opposition has criticized any sort of these restrictions, everybody on the front bench has been quick to say and boast that your government makes recommendations based on evidence, based on science. There is no evidence and no science, according to your expert panel, to continue to operate quarantine hotels. So please, could somebody who is into evidence-based governing please explain what does Dr. Naylor not know that you guys at the cabinet table apparently do know when it comes to the science to support quarantine hotels?
Well, maybe I can start, David. And first of all, thank the testing and screening panel for what I would consider a very good roadmap for the next steps on alleviation of measures at the border. Of course, the committee worked on that with prior to the emergence, or at least the widespread emergence of the Delta variant, which has changed considerably some of the projections here in Canada and certainly internationally. And has affected modeling in terms of if the Delta variant is actually able to get a foothold in our communities in a significant way, especially in communities with low vaccination rates. Secondly, all of the advice that we get from a variety of expert panels is then fed through the Public Health Agency of Canada and, of course, Dr. Tam and a variety of different scientists and researchers that advise us. And, of course, finally, I'll say this, David, Canadians have sacrificed an extraordinary amount over the last year and a half in ways that we know and ways that we don't. Small businesses have struggled to stay open. In many cases, some have not managed to stay open. The Canadian government has spent billions of dollars supporting provinces and territories and individuals to get through this extremely difficult time. People have been separated from their families. And this government believes that a prudent, careful and cautious approach to alleviating measures is what's required. We don't want to see all of our hard work put at risk as a result of moving too quickly without truly understanding how the changes we're proposing today will impact Canadians. And so we work with provinces and territories. We work with our colleagues across government to make sure that we make choices that are based on science and evidence, and that reflect the ongoing science and evidence, as we know, that evolves with COVID-19.
Okay. So, again, an evidence-based government would say, look around and say, okay, vaccination rates are X, and hospital capacity is Y, and case counts are Z. And having achieved whatever metrics you think you should have achieved, you would have said, right, we can go to phase one of our easing travel restrictions because we'd hit in certain benchmarks, I would assume. And so that's why it's confusing, both on the technical call we just had and in your first response, I think, to Glenn, why you don't have some metrics that you can present to us today for phase two. You had metrics, I would assume, for phase one, which we're getting to today. So having hit those metrics and being able to define them, why can't you define some metrics, give us a sense of case counts, vaccination rates, et cetera, to go to phase two?
Patty, you're on mute.
Thanks again, David, for the question. And again, that's exactly what we're doing. We're monitoring a number of metrics, starting with vaccination of Canadians. And we know that we can see Canadians step up in extraordinary ways to get vaccinated. We're vaccinating even faster than we had originally anticipated. In fact, almost 20%, if not 20% of Canadians have received their second dose. But we also know that with the Delta variant posing some significant challenges to some of our international colleagues, not the least of the UK, who has been gathering a lot of data and providing that to the world, we need to be very cautious. And so the metrics that we are looking at and that we're discussing with provinces and territories are things like case rates, capacity to deal with outbreaks, hospitalizations and ICU admissions, and of course the international behavior of the virus. And we do see a number of international jurisdictions still significantly struggling to save the lives of their citizens. And so we'll proceed with caution. This is what Canadians expect of us. They expect us to not squander those hard-won gains over the last year and a half. Again, I thank Canadians for the sacrifices they're making to keep themselves and their communities safe.
Thank you, Minister Hajdu. Merci. Operator, next question. Opératrice, prochaine question.
Our next question is from Justin Ling from Freelancer. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Hey, good morning. Following up on David's question, obviously your target the whole time has been 75% with one dose, 20% with both doses. We're likely to hit that this week and then, slowly surpass it. Why is that target no longer good enough? Especially when you consider, you mentioned the Delta variant a lot. The Delta variant is already responsible for community spread in Canada at roughly the same rate as the U.S. At a certain point, how do you explain this as something other than sort of asking Canadians to be fearful of what comes in from abroad, even though it's already basically here?
Well, thank you very much for the question, Justin. And I'll say again that over the last year and a half, we have watched Canadians across this country sacrifice tremendously to protect themselves and to stop the spread of COVID-19 in their communities. And the measures that we're taking today are a reflection of that hard work, and they're a reflection of the growing vaccination. But we do want to be certain that when we start to see increased numbers of travelers traveling around the world to a variety of different locations and higher volumes of people coming from all kinds of parts of the world, that we have the domestic protection that we need for any importation of COVID-19 that slips through. And we also want to make sure that provinces and territories are fully certain that they have the capacity to deal with any outbreaks that may happen. Well, listen, COVID-19 is here globally, and it's here to stay for some time. And so our primary job as the Government of Canada is to work collaboratively with provinces and territories to protect the safety of Canadians. This announcement today is a great step on the way to the alleviation of measures at the border, and it reflects a confidence in the science that is evolving around the effectiveness of full vaccination.
Okay, right, but you're not. You were given recommendations in May that provided a path forward to allowing partially and fully vaccinated travelers come in from the U.S. You're not actually going to implement those recommendations until fully more than a month after they were made. What's more, a big part of the strategy that your government has talked about what a full reopening would look like involves some form of a vaccine passport or vaccine verification. Can you provide an update on where that's at and whether or not Canadians will see that before the end of 2021? Obviously, a big part of the strategy you're talking about, one that relies on vaccinations as a prerequisite for reopening, is going to require, it seems like, that technology. Can you provide an update on when we should expect to see that?
Justin, allow me to at least begin the answer to that question. I agree. We have acknowledged that there are certain benchmarks, certain thresholds of vaccination and case counts, which would allow us to begin appropriately and carefully to ease some of the restrictions we have at our borders. We've reached one of those benchmarks, and today we announced that that's going to have an impact. It gives us an opportunity to begin to ease measures for fully vaccinated Canadian travelers, those with a right of entry, and even foreign nationals with the right of an entry to enter the country safely. But I think it's really important to be clear. We've reached an important threshold, but we haven't reached the finish line. There's a lot more work to do. We need to make sure that a substantial majority of Canadians are fully vaccinated. And when we reach that threshold, it's also going to facilitate additional measures, which we're working very hard to be prepared for. Now, with respect to the use of the ArriveCAN app, first of all, it's been in place for several months, and it's been widely adopted by Canadian travelers and those who have been coming to Canada. Over 2 million travelers have actually used the digital ArriveCAN app to provide their personal and travel information, as well as their health information, to the Public Health Agency of Canada and the Border Service officers to make a determination on their eligibility to enter the country and to their ability to adhere to the public health measures that have been put in place. And we have been making additional adjustments to that ArriveCAN app to allow travelers who are coming to Canada, those who currently would have a right of entry, to use the ArriveCAN app to provide that information on their vaccine verification digitally, as well as provide to bring the documents along with them. And in each case, the Border Service officers will verify the validity of that vaccine information prior to allowing entry into the country. The system that we've developed and put in place, well tested through our experience, is going to be able to enable us to facilitate the arrival of travelers, not just the ones exempted under the current measures being announced today, but in the future, for other people who will be allowed entry to use the ArriveCAN app for people coming to Canada, both by land and by air. Will be able to provide that information to us, and our Border Service officers will be able to determine, using the application, plus a number of other questions and tests that they will apply, to ensure that those who are arriving in Canada, in fact, are fully vaccinated and therefore eligible for the easing of restrictions that we have put in place.
Thank you, Minister Blair. Merci. Operator, next question. Opératrice, prochaine question.
Thank you. La prochaine question est de Boris Proulx du Devoir. À vous la parole. Please go ahead.
Oui, bonjour. J'aimerais savoir, et désolé si vous avez déjà répondu sous certaines formes à cette question, mais si c'est sécuritaire pour les personnes complètement vaccinées d'éviter la quarantaine, pourquoi ce n'est pas sécuritaire d'accepter les touristes internationaux comme les Américains et quand est-ce qu'on va pouvoir voir des changements à ce niveau-là?
Peut-être, si vous me permettez, moi, je pourrais commenter. Si d'autres collègues ont par la suite des commentaires, ils ou elles pourront ajouter un point de vue. Comme nous avons dit depuis le début, les mesures aux frontières sont essentielles pour protéger la santé des Canadiens, la sécurité des Canadiens. Le Canada en entier a fait énormément de sacrifices pour essayer de vaincre COVID-19, pour rendre la situation des hospitalisations soutenable. Alors, il y a eu, depuis le début de la pandémie, des sacrifices importants, y compris tragiquement des décès et des gens qui ont été gravement malades pour longtemps. Alors, toutes les mesures que nous allons prendre afin d'alléger les obligations de santé publique liées aux frontières seront appliquées d'une mesure progressive. Nous allons insister d'avoir accès aux meilleures données et avis scientifiques. Et nous allons aussi être conscients du volume de passagers, de volume de visiteurs, comme mes collègues ont bien dit, qui risquent d'arriver à nos frontières. Alors, qu'est-ce que nous annonçons aujourd'hui? Et le début, c'est une première phase que nous pensons est responsable de permettre aux personnes complètement vaccinées qui ont légalement tout de suite le droit d'entrer au Canada, accès avec des mesures allégées en termes de santé publique. Et nous allons continuer de discuter avec les provinces, avec les experts en santé publique, le moment approprié, nous espérons, pour amener d'autres mesures allégées et envisager la possibilité que d'autres personnes puissent venir au Canada avec des mesures qui seront ajustées en conséquence du risque en termes de santé publique.
Merci. Je ne sais pas si un autre ministre voulait prendre la parole ou sinon c'est tout de suite mon suivi, mais je vais y aller. J'aimerais vous poser une question. Ça vous a été posé aussi, je crois, concernant le hockey. J'ai entendu le ministre dire que la LNH était un strong partner ou un partenaire, un bon partenaire. Donc, je veux savoir, là, il y a eu déjà le directeur général des Golden Knights de Vegas qui a été confirmé positif à la COVID-19. Il y a eu Dominique Ducharme aussi, du Canadien de Montréal. Donc, à partir de quel moment est-ce que la LNH n'est plus considérée comme un bon partenaire? Est-ce que c'est après avoir fait venir 10 cas de COVID, 20 cas de COVID? Je veux vous entendre là-dessus.
Merci encore pour la question. Et comme j'avais déjà dit, nous avons engagé avec nos partenaires, pas seulement au niveau du gouvernement fédéral, avec les fonctionnaires qui travaillent dans le secteur de santé publique, mais même avec nos partenaires au niveau de les provinces, on avait travaillé en étroite collaboration avec le gouvernement de Québec pour faciliter la continuation de l'hockey dans les séries. Comme j'avais déjà dit, le LNH est un partenaire très fort et la raison pour ça est parce qu'il y a un protocole compréhensif pour protéger la sécurité et la santé de tous les joueurs, tous les officiels et même tout le public pendant les séries. Et ça, c'est la raison que nous avons la confiance dans cette plan. Il y a la transparence, il y a des protocoles qui sont vraiment efficaces. Et chaque fois où il y a un cas, le LNH et même l'équipe mettent en place les mesures pour protéger tout le monde. Donc, on va continuer de regarder les situations sur le terrain et procéder avec le conseil de nos fonctionnaires publics qui travaillent dans le secteur santé. Merci.
Thank you, Minister Mendicino. Merci. Operator, next question. Opératrice, prochaine question.
Thank you, merci. Our next question is from Marike Walsh from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Good morning. Thanks for taking our questions. Minister Hajdu or somebody else, can you please explain to us and to Canadians who are very curious about this, why these rules require kids who are not vaccinated to self-isolate at home with their parents who can leave the house? Will that not just mean that essentially travel will still be very low this summer?
Well, I can start, Marike, and thank you for the question. And undoubtedly, this will be challenging for families who want to travel. At this time, the research and science obviously indicates that children can get sick with COVID-19 and they can transmit COVID-19. And because vaccines are not authorized for use in children under 12, unfortunately, most children will not be vaccinated. And so the advice from the team that is of scientists and public health experts is that to protect Canadians from contact with an imported case of COVID-19, that children under 12 do have to quarantine for the full 14 days. Of course, they can still avoid the hotel and their parents as well. They can quarantine at home. And obviously, this is with the lens of ensuring that any unvaccinated traveler that potentially is infected with COVID-19 is taking the appropriate public health measures to protect the community in which they arrive.
For that answer, I want to go back to this question about the government's failure to release any metrics to justify their rules today or into the future. The business community has been very clear that they need this certainty. They need to be able to plan and to understand when things will change. Why is the federal government unable to release any metrics when every other province and territory has been able to release very clear metrics in order to explain their planning and to explain what to expect next?
Well, again, thank you very much. And first of all, I understand the frustration of people who want certainty around what will happen next. And I think that is one of the most challenging spaces in dealing with a pandemic of this nature, is that, of course, the virus has thrown us a number of curveballs over the last year and a half. And I will just repeat that we are looking at a variety of metrics. And of course, we work closely with provinces and territories as well, who are the first responders, if you will, to outbreaks and a variety of different situations that could arise from growth in cases. We're watching very closely, for example, domestic rates of hospitalization and case growth or decline as it might be.
Why are you not releasing the metrics?
Again, we're working very closely, as I said, with provinces, with territories, of course, with the scientists that are advising us through the Public Health Agency of Canada. What we do know is that Canada will be much better protected when we have a much higher rate of full vaccination. So one metric that Canadians can watch for is the rate of fully vaccinated Canadians that is at least 75%. And also how the disease is behaving in Canada. Are we seeing sustained and prolonged outbreaks in regions of the country? How are we managing? In terms of our own hospitalization rates and capacity? We've seen, just a few weeks ago, we were sending healthcare professionals around this country to help with burgeoning hospital cases and admissions to ICU that were straining and buckling healthcare systems across the country. We want to make sure that we are not in that situation ever again. And of course, then we're watching the international scene very closely. We know that COVID is mutating, that the Delta variant is the variant of concern that we have our eyes on right now, but that as COVID rages out of control in other countries, that it presents a clear and present danger to all countries. And so on the international front, monitoring very closely what's happening with the virus and as it shifts and adapts to its population. So listen, we'll come back to Canadians. We know there's a desire for next steps, and we'll be very clear and transparent with Canadians. But for now, I would say to Canadians, continue to step up and get immunized, help those around you to get immunized, get ready for your second dose when it's your turn, and we are getting there. We can see the finish line. Let's finish strong, and let's make sure that we protect our gains.
And may I just add something to what Minister Hajdu has said? Transport Canada has a restart working group with the industry where we are in regular contact and discussions with them. So let me again repeat what others have said. We recognize the desire and the anxiety to have, understandably, to restart travel, and I know there are a lot of questions. We need to continue to be responsible and prudent, but we also need to engage, and like we have the industry on preparing for phase 2. So we're talking about what the expansion of the number of airports is going to look like. We're talking about testing infrastructure in these airports. So and by the way, budget 2021 has within it up to $100 million to support airports and industry to prepare for that restart. So there are ongoing conversations where we provide ideas to the industry, seek their feedback, receive new ideas from the industry. And that work is ongoing right now, in addition to our discussions with provinces and other stakeholders. Thanks.
And America, if I may also sort of add one other consideration. For the last 16 months, Canada and the United States have imposed together travel restrictions for non-essential travel between our two countries. Those measures that we have put in place have been reciprocal. Basically, if a Canadian traveling into the United States or an American traveling into Canada, the restrictions for non-essential travel have been in place. I would point out that just last night, the United States extended their travel restrictions with the border with Canada and Mexico to July 21st, exactly as we have done. And I hope that Canadians would understand that we will continue to work very collaboratively with our international partners, particularly with our ally, the United States. But we're on both sides of the border. We're proceeding with appropriate caution and care and taking the advice of our public health experts as we begin to ease border measures. But clearly we're not there yet, and we've got a lot of work to do. And I think this is another opportunity just to encourage Canadians to continue to get those vaccinations. When we reach a point where a very substantial majority of Canadians are fully vaccinated, we have the opportunity then to enter into, the potential for additional restrictions, keeping in mind as well, the very legitimate concern that exists with respect to the variants of concern. And that's why our quarantine measures and our testing measures have proven very effective and are still very important to us in protecting the health of Canadians.
Thank you, ministers. Merci. Operator, last question. Opératrice, dernière question.
Merci. Thank you. La dernière question est de Mélanie Marquis de la presse. À vous la parole. Please go ahead.
Merci. Hello, ministers. My question is for Minister Hajdu. Why did you choose not to consider people who have been infected by COVID-19 and had only one shot to be considered fully vaccinated? Because as you know, in Quebec, people who have had COVID can only get one dose normally.
Patty, you're on mute.
Merci, Mélanie. Nous avons posé cette question de notre communauté des scientifiques et j'espère nous avons une réponse très vite. We've actually asked the scientists in the scientific community to study this issue and to give us advice as the understanding evolves around the protective nature of vaccination on top of positivity of COVID or having had COVID and recovered. We know that in Quebec, this is considered fully vaccinated, and we'll be watching that science very carefully. As I said, it's an area that is still uncertain for many researchers, but we've asked NACI and others to look at the question more closely, and we'll come back to those travelers very soon.
Yes, and as a follow-up, still for Minister Hajdu, why is Sinovac not considered an adequate vaccine since it's authorized by the WHO?
Well, thank you again for the question. And we've chosen to start with the 4 vaccines authorized by Health Canada because, of course, we know those the best, having our regulators having reviewed all of the data to approve them in Canada. We are contemplating how we will expand that list, including using the WHO-approved list. But for now, we're starting with the Health Canada-approved vaccines, and we'll continue to assess those next steps as we move forward.
Thank you, Minister Hajdu. Merci beaucoup. Donc, voilà qui met fin à cette conférence de presse. That marks the end of the press conference. Merci. Thank you. Bonne journée. Have a wonderful day.
Merci. Thank you. The conference has now ended. Please disconnect your line.